Welcome back to Attack 404. This is the last video that we're going to be shooting regarding phishing and the phishing analysis. So in this one, we're going to be taking a look at almost everything that we've covered, but only the interesting bullet points that we need to take into account. And then we're going to do a full-on phishing write-up using some of the tools and utilities that I've developed. So in this portion, we're going to go over some phishing analysis gotchas, and I'm probably going to splice in different segments that you can take a look at exactly what I'm talking about. So domains that identify users by name or hash are a little bit dangerous for two reasons. The first reason is if the company is doing a phishing simulation against its own people to see who's going to click on links and who needs training by HR and who needs to be fired, whatever they do, you're going to ensnare that user into a situation where they didn't click on the link, and it becomes, well, who clicked on the link, and it's a terrible back and forth. I'm not going to go into the details on normally how that plays out with phishing campaigns that you find users clicked on, and then trying to prove, that they actually did click on phishing test that the company did. That's a conversation for another time and dimension. The other portion of this is if you click on a domain, and you're not doing this inside of a sandbox, you click on a domain that has the user email hashed or the user address in the URL, you're going to ensnare that user in a twofold process. One, the threat actor is going to know that that email address is active because someone somewhere on the internet clicked on that link that says, hey, Jane is active and we need to blast her with as many campaigns in the future as we can. Or what's going to end up happening is if you do it on a network that's being monitored, it's going to go back to the security team if that ends up becoming an indicator of compromise, the domain or URL. And that user is going to now have to battle it out with, I didn't click on the link, someone else did, and it's a mess. I'll splice that in a moment to show you what that looks like and how to get around that. So, identifying and isolating risky users can be done on a twofold process. The first one is that you would have to pretty much identify the users that clicked on previous campaigns and have a known history of clicking on things. And the other portion of that is what users are they? VPs, again, and anybody at the C-level, C-suite, are kind of brain dead when it comes to links because they think they could do whatever they want. They're the crybabies of the environment. So there's no real repercussions, and someone should start firing them because they're like stupid. But anyway, when you identify the users on the second portion I was discussing, you want to go back into Active Directory and kind of look at tools in PowerShell to identify what the roles of those people are, to validate users in their roles at a company, just to see if any of the email recipients on a list or the single user was someone high up at the company, or if this was a collective and it was, let's say, something like whaling or spear phishing. We can use this PowerShell command, which would require that you have elevated privileges, and then when we press enter on the command, we see that the user is actually a VP. And again, that can lead back to what type of phishing this is. We can also see if the user has been logged out, and also when the last time their password was set, and if the password is expired. And you can see that that's here. That's the importance of doing the validating on the users, especially through Active Directory, because now you can get a clearer picture of who they are and who is being targeted at the company and the steps that you're going to have to take for those individuals. Country of origin plays a very important role in most of your write-ups because if you understand where your threat groups are located, you could kind of put a more higher fidelity on them. This isn't the case all the time. If you see that you have threat actors in China that are targeting you, or threat actors in Brazil that are targeting you, or threat actors in Canada, whatever the case may be, you can start to do more or place more resources, time, and effort into either blocking traffic from those locations, vetting the traffic coming from those locations, or if you have business dealings in those locations, how to wean out and tailor your environment for detections in those countries. It can also give you a small window of opportunity to look at what the emerging threats are if you're paying for threat intel or doing that threat intel on your own with open source tools to see what could be on the horizon that you might need to start preparing for. There's different indicators of compromise in every email. Some of those indicators of compromise are definitely going to be IP addresses and domains. The other indicators of compromise you're going to find are going to be email addresses, and also seldom is it going to be with phishing that you're going to find that indicators of compromise will be hashes. And the reason why I say hashes is because a lot of threat actors will in fact send HTML files that will interact with another domain, and if I have the availability of gathering that, I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so in this little email that we have here, this clown decided that my American Express card was probably going to expire, or whatever the case is. This is an example of phishing that comes with multiple indicators, and one of those indicators being a potential hash. Now there's a lot more information you could get from the PDF, but I'm going to focus specifically on the hash first, and I'm going to show you how to get that. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to save the attachment, and then once it's saved, I'll pivot over to a command prompt and we'll go from there. So now we snap this in and we see that there's 3 emails in here, and we also have the PDF itself, and we're going to do the following. We will issue certutil, and we'll grab the MD5 with the certutil hash file. Then we can take this and we can throw that into VirusTotal, see what the reputation is on that. There's 2 different types of email analysis depending on the environment that you're in. It could be MSG or EML. One belongs to Thunderbird, one belongs to the Microsoft software suite, and that's normally in your Outlook. While Thunderbird is easy to deal with, Microsoft might require certain libraries to be read by programs because it's quote-unquote proprietary, and I could get into that in shorts and stuff like that. I'm going to give you a little nugget of information on how to determine if in the event that you are undergoing a phishing simulation or a phishing test. And this basically goes back to identifying the users and clicking on the URLs. PhishMe has their own domains that they send email from. In the first 3 minutes of you looking at an email, the header more specifically, if you see it comes from PhishMe, you can probably deduce that it is in fact a phishing simulation. Now, that's not to basically say that all emails that contain a source are gonna be in fact from PhishMe, because I could register a domain with .com and then a subdomain of PhishMe, and that might escape the event horizon of a lot of L1s and L2s. I'm taking the time to train you guys. I'm not taking the time to show you how to do things wrong and in haste. So even if someone out there is like, hey, that's a good idea, and they register that domain, ma vaya farin culo, I told you what to look for with whois and doing reputation checks. Finally, the last thing that we're going to take a look at on this side of the fence, almost the last thing, is how threat intel platforms and sandboxes, especially public ones, can put your organization at risk, even if you're a small business. I'll splice in another video clip of what that looks like and how you could basically size up large organizations that L1s or L2s that didn't know how to do proper vetting, released internal binaries, applications, and documents that can give a threat actor a pivot point in how to attack the internal network. To give you guys and gals a view of what threat intelligence can do and the downside of threat intelligence, this is going to be one of the downsides. Now, I'm picking on Trek Bikes. We're also going to take a look at a few other ones. And if we go to relations, we start to see that there's files and things that may have been uploaded by some other analysts. I'll zoom in here and I'll also zoom in again, and when I do my post-prod, you can see that some of the files that we have on this end kind of look like they might be important files or they might be malware. Sometimes what will end up happening is an organization will in fact upload files that they have that are legitimate that they think is in fact malicious. This happens at quite a few companies. So this isn't only limited to Trek Bikes. If we go and we look at Dell.com and we go to relations, we see the same thing happen. There's the potential that some of these applications are internal applications that shouldn't be external, that some analyst somewhere uploaded. And if we do the same thing to Fox, we see the same thing happen again. And if we go ahead and we do the same thing to CNN, what do we see? If we go back up to relations, we kind of see the same thing again. So this is why you want to be a little cautious with your threat intel platforms, especially when you enter engagements with contractual agreements. You want to look for any verbiage that says that they're going to share it and either try to redact that or make sure that they don't share that information with the platform or any other people, that it stays to you. And if they don't do that and they're going to share it anyway, you need to start thinking about how you want to proceed with that given organization or threat intel platform. Finally, there's something that we need to discuss, and it is called, what I like to call the ramping phase. What this phase basically means is that you will be receiving blank emails or emails with a dot in it or just garbled crap that doesn't mean anything. Take note, because normally this happens right before a campaign is going to hit your organization. Whether that be a malware campaign, a phishing campaign. Sometimes it happens around the holidays, so you'll be looking at like Thanksgiving, you'll be looking at Black Friday, you'll be looking at New Year's Eve, Christmas, Hanukkah, Hanukkah, Ramadan, whatever the case may be, that's the times that they're going to be looking to do these ramping phases. And its sole purpose is to determine if in the event those email addresses that they scraped are still active and alive. No other intended purpose. If you really want to get stupid and cute, you could configure something where if the email body is blank, send back a rejection email and have everybody taken off their lists. So, screw you. IOC WTFs. This is a fun one. So, dead domains with a bad reputation, do you block them? Depending on how your organization views this, yes and no. Would I block them? Yes. And I would continue to monitor to see if those domains need to be taken down. On the other side of the coin is you don't have to block them, and if they have been blocked, then you could take them out of Zscaler or any proxy blocks that you've put in because you don't want to put unnecessary strain on the network before someone comes in or goes out. Domains with no reputation, this is a sketchy one because you're going to have to fall back on, was this domain registered in the last X amount of days? Was this domain in fact a phishing domain? Is it known phishing when I look at it? Is it some random URL that has nothing to do with, let's say, Dell, or has nothing to do with LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever the case is, and it's just showing their logos and stuff? If it is, then chances are it's phishing, and even though it's got a good reputation, you're now justified in blocking it. Domains with a good reputation that, let's say, are a third-party vendor. Coca-Cola has the unfortunate event of being attacked, and someone hosts a phishing campaign. Do you block them? In cases like this, a temporary block might be justified. If it is a vendor, again, a temporary block might also be justified, but contact with the vendor to remediate that issue and then unblock them once you have communications that it's no longer a threat. So identifying threat types and identifying threat actors is a big one depending on how big your organization is, and this is going to go into other threat platforms that you'd probably pay for. I'm not going to get into those. I'll list them in the description. But if you're seeing an uptick in being targeted, you might be the target of a threat group, and trying to get a handle on who's eyeballing you might give you a better vantage point in how to defend and structure your security to handle something like that. Another thing is, if you're going to be dealing with the whole sandbox and we're going to do it ourselves, you want to get justification in place to have a Linux malware and phishing lab. If you don't want to execute something that's on the portable executable sense and you want to do all your static analysis, Linux is really good at that, but you will be missing out on your dynamic. But Linux also has a lot of the tools baked in, so if you forget certain tools or you're looking to eyeball tools that may have a high price tag, Linux probably has open source alternatives. I am also developing a ton of tools for analysis that are pretty much on the cheap and that organizations could leverage, and I'll be giving you some of the tools in a watered down version that you guys can play with. So if you want to set up your own lab, you have tools that you could like mess around with. Again, downloaded phishing pages that communicate with other domains. This is a kind of two-part thing. I've covered this in one of the other phishing videos. If you have a domain that's going to communicate with, let's say, a secondary domain, who do you block? You block both. You don't block the latter or the former. One is doing the phishing collection, the other one is doing the phishing processing. So if I leverage, let's say, Logitech, and I host a phishing campaign where you log into Logitech, and then I pivot that information to do a post call to, let's say, Apress. Apress is processing and sending out the emails to alert me that I've gotten someone on the hook, while Logitech is providing the front facing application to get you interested to log in. So you're going to naturally block both. Phishing pages are going to accompany hashes. They're also going to accompany email addresses in certain cases, depending on how it's set up. Again, I'll show you how to look at that and how to analyze that and then how to put in blocks for those types of campaigns. So now we see we received another email that has the HTML designation in the attachment, and you can see it's in Chinese, Mandarin, with a bit of small text to, this is important information. It's only meant for your eyes. Sure, guy. So we already popped this into the lab. What we're going to do is going to open up the lab, which I guess I didn't pop it into. So we're going to copy that now. And what we're going to do is we're going to open this up with Notepad++ and see what we can find. So sometimes they do launch and create the images with base64. And you can see the base64 information here. We would have to probably screw around with the base 64. So let's do this. Oh, how cute that is. This might actually be malware. I love when they screw with ISOs. So what they're doing is they're spreading malware with a link. So the idiots, let's see if they were smart. Yep. Nope, they weren't. So in a real world with malware, you'd kind of want to hide that. So all you see is inquiry. Whoever put this together wasn't using all of their brain. They must have lead in the plumbing. But anyway. Yeah, okay, tomorrow. So I'm not going to take a deep dive into this with how this would actually work. I'll probably save this malware for another time when we start getting into malware analysis. But normally what will end up happening is you will find that they will probably send you this HTML file. And in the HTML file, it'll have a get and post. And I'll link resources to what that looks like in the documentation that I provide in the description. So keep an eye out for that. Normally, if you're blocking by hash, you want to block something in the network. If you have Palo Altos or other, enterprise tools that can see inside and what a hash is on, let's say, mail attachments or on the firewall for downloads, that's where the hashes come to play. Legitimate domains hosting phishing, and this is mostly going to be like Google surveys and similar domains. If it's a subdomain, you can block it with the dot or the leading dot with Zscaler. Unfortunately, if it's a / some random crap and it's a page that you register with, you can't block it. The best that you're going to do is probably put in an email pull and get those emails pulled out of the inbox before anyone else has the unfortunate event of clicking on those URLs. If you're dealing with a SIEM solution like Splunk, you're going to probably bang in that domain with the full URL and see who's touched it, and then issue your password resets or re-imaging or whatever the organization requires. Legitimate domains that host malicious content that users can browse. This is a big one because we used to deal with, I believe it was a car website, and the car website loved to serve up malicious ads. And we would block the domain because it was a malicious ad that was serving something up, and we would get emails quite constantly and frequently that, hey, we like to do this on our lunch break. Well, guess what, buddy? Too bad. Because you're not supposed to be using the computer for personal stuff. So again, this is going to go back to your policies. Ask your manager about that. Chances are they're probably going to block it if there's an uptick in malware, or they might have you hunt down the ad campaigns and then you block it that way. That's time consuming. Let's talk about threat intel. Recipient reputation is another key factor in all of this. The reason why recipient reputation holds true in this talk is because if your user is going out there and they're signing up for OnlyFans and they're signing up for Facebook and LinkedIn and they're using corporate email resources and any of those companies get popped, you could potentially have that user suffer from credential stuffing, especially if they're VPs. VPs love to do this. They'll sign up for bullshit websites, and then when they get popped, they don't change their passwords quite frequently, and they'll basically come back and use that same password with no MFA, and they're in the network, and the VP's like, I didn't do nothing wrong, and they're like, oh, it's okay, stupid, we'll protect you. So you want to look into that. Another thing is the password changes is a big one because, again, credential stuffing, and I'll show you how to do that with the splices, or the previous splice that we did in the first bullet point, to kind of look at when someone's changed their password and what their role was at the company. And then it's up to the company or push to the company to get the organization to kind of grab those VPs or the people that are actually clicking on those links and smack them with the stank on their hand glove with a nice puff of powder. Be like, get back in line, because they're going to need that because they're putting the company at risk. Environment threat hunting is another thing where you want to take other things that we've seen, and again, I'll splice this in really quick, that we've seen through, let's say, IBM X-Force that was hosting things, and we'll kind of do a quick search in the environment just to see if any of the previously associated risks or any of the previously associated IOCs are on our network that we haven't seen before, and also what the other email addresses have been doing or things like that. So whatever you find, you want to come back into the environment and check, because sometimes things do slip through the cracks. So as you can see, I've taken the liberty in running a quick little scan on this domain here. So I'm going to pull up an editor and I'm going to start typing out all the stuff that we would normally do and get, and what this would look like in a threat hunt from stuff that gets returned from a domain that, let's say, they were using this as a means to do phishing. Okay, so we're going to grab the domain that we already have, and we already know that we're going to feed this into our SIEM. So in order to do that, I'll make this as big as I can. That did not sound right at all. Dirty minds. So we're going to do index equals. In this case, we'll say we're working with Zscaler. And we're going to do URL equals. We'll pop that in. Probably throw this in as well, just to see if anything hit on that one. And then we'll do, let's get a little crazy, do earliest 90 days. And then what we'll do is table this out. Some of them will have method. I don't think Zscaler will do it. That might be PAN. There might be a source type involved. I'll talk about source types as we progress. And then we're basically going to look for this domain. Now, let's say if in the event that there is, and we look down here we have MD5 hashes. We'll zoom in immensely on this. So we can grab the MD5 hashes here. Shut up. And we could come back to something like semantic endpoint protection. And let's say hash or hash in, and then we could do that. And then we can grab this one. And then just for the hell of it, we'll grab the next one. I'm not going to do all of them because I want to keep this short and sweet. And then we'll do this. So what this is basically going to do is it's going to cross-reference after we do this search and get everything we want and then export it out. We could get the hashes that, let's say, semantic endpoint protection seen. We may be able to do it with PAN. And if PAN has hash, or if it's in a source type, we can access the hashes, then fine. We could do it based on host. And then we can issue either malware byte scans, SEP scans, or any type of endpoint scan that we need. And then issue a reset or a reimage on that box. But if there's other domains and indicators that we want to search that this is malicious, then we could go ahead and run Splunk searches like we've done here. We could also run this in our EDR tools just to see if they've communicated to any of these domains or if any of these hashes were seen, because we could find hash information on the endpoint, in the network, and in email, and also in transit from like something like Zscaler or a download. So that's some points to consider. Analysis with the Wayback Machine, especially for the dead domains, is going to help you because you'll probably get a nice little snapshot of what the domain looked like before it was taken down. So if you need to identify the campaign that was going out, even though the domain is down, you can say, hey, this was American Express phishing, or this was 0365 phishing. So the last thing on this is going to be the domain engagements and get and post. The difference between a GET request is that you're requesting the page, and the difference with the POST request is that you're sending data to the page. What that means is you are authenticating or sending credentials to that site. If you have the availability of logging what's going on with your proxies or your firewalls where they're getting the GET and the POST requests, look for these two, because a GET will show where they contacted the site and a POST will actually show where they've sent the credentials. You could justify, yeah, not only did they make contact, they sent their password too, and back out with a stank on the hand glove. So now we're going to go through the phishing analysis rundown. So I started most of the ticket, and this is basically going to be the template for us, and then I'm going to like chop in and splice in what I'm doing in between. So in this scenario, we see that what I discussed when we do the mouse over, it's going to show that it says corporate idiot, and I'll zoom in on that and show you that it has my username in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the link first. I'm going to open this in the browser. And we're not going to put corporate idiot in there. And then we basically go to the site. So we see that this is some form of phishing because it's asking for a password. So if we put a password in, it's going to redirect. So what we will do is we will mark 2. And then what we will do is we'll add the domains like so. Reason being is we don't want anyone to click on this. And then if we go back to our box, we can grab this out, and then we basically put this in here as well, and we invalidate the domain like that, so no one could click on it. So because there's no downloads in this email, there's not much for us to take. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the message header, and we're basically going to grab all of this out. And we will include the entire message header that we know is part of the entire email. From this, we're going to take out bits of information like we did before. So we're going to look for, grab the sender, since we're already over here. We'll say the date reported was today. And we'll also grab the user that it was intended for. If we go back to the campaign type, we see that this is for, so this is email phishing in and of itself. So what we will do is enter, so we'll just say the recipient was one that was corporate idiot, no hashes. So we're going to pull from this, I'm going to do this quick, is the sending user's name, which you already have, the IP address, and the domain where they came from. So again, we're going to take out the receiving server and the IP addresses that they have, and then we're going to do lookups on them. So with that, we'll do this. And then what I'm going to do to be cute, funny, and fresh is I'm going to break this down. And then we're going to start getting the reputations on all of these. So let me splice in what this is going to look like in the terminal, and I'll be right back. So this one is rather interesting because it's coming back as NASA. Naughty, naughty NASA. And obviously this comes back as Google, so... Cannot block NASA, cannot block Google. We can also cross-reference the IP addresses that we have, and we'll do that last. So now we're going to do where the attacker originated from. So you see it says it's Venezuela, so we're going to take this down to here. We're doing the other lookups just in case that there's something that we didn't catch before. We're doing it now. So this is Latinic as well, and this is probably Venezuela too. Alright, so we're going to take this. Now I'm going to start the write-up on this. I've included one click because it's going to flow into what we're going to be doing. Now I'm going to go back to the original email and we're going to copy the URL, and then like we did before, we will redact it because it shows them basically what they're looking for. Then what we're going to do is we're going to also state the following. Type in some bullshit, page gets redirected, all's fine, cute and well. So with the blocks, we also have to suggest the following, because if in the event we do block this one application, we are in fact blocking, I know we've gone through this with the previous phishing campaign, we will end up blocking a Google domain. So if you look at this one, it'll end up blocking a Google domain. Now there's no listing in this right now. So if we backtrack this and we keep going, we don't see any matches for these subdomains until we hit this point here. We see it's Google. So again, we could block the ending, and basically we add that to our ticket. So I'm gonna run down this really quick because I know I spliced all of this as fast as possible because of time differences. So we're going to gather as much information about the email itself, who sent it, what they do, what their position is. We could even go in and say And this would require some type of white glove bullshit because, you know, corporate crybabies, you didn't wipe my ass with Huggies, I don't know. So, malicious hashes, there's none that we can speak of. IP addresses, we're going to be blocking at the domain level, so you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So we see that there's 2 URLs. Now, we grabbed all the whois information and all that stuff that we needed for the lookups. One thing that we do need to end up doing is we need to add a segment for threat searches. And here is where we put the Splunk indexes that I showed you in the previous videos together. And then we include something like this. And then you put your searches in there. And that's pretty much it. Now, I know I sped run through this, so what I'm going to end up doing is showing you the tools and utilities that I wrote that kind of help and make this a little bit easier and faster for you. And I'll clip that in right after this one. The last and final slide that we're going to go through are these 7 key things that we've gone through throughout the video. Then we're going to go through a quick analysis with the software that I've written because we all like being lazy. So when we are doing our analysis, the email header is very important and the message types are also going to play a very little role, or small role I should say, depending on what email client you use. The message header, you want to find out where it came from. You also want to tie the threat actor's domain to the IP and the receiving host that sent it. And I covered this in the quick rundown that I'll show you with the software that I've written. Sender OSINT can also be very important because it can give you an eye on what the attacker is or who the attacker is or what might be attacking you. And then also the domains that some of your phishing might be coming from, because that might be a fingerprint as what the threat actor is targeting if they're just financial institutions or schools and things of that nature. Downloaded phishing is one of the things you may come across. I've come across it quite a few times. Again, you're going to have to find the domain that is being sent to, which will have to be blocked. You also might want to capture traffic just in case they want to see what that looks like on the network end. And we could get into capture analysis at a later time with Network Monitor, TCP dump, and Wireshark. And then finally, the IOCs that come along with it. I've showed you how to use certutil, but there are other tools that you could use that'll grab you IOCs depending on the OS that you're in. Again, the domain engagements are very important. Get and post play a vital role because get means they requested the page, post means they sent data to the page. Lastly, which you also want to look for are AD user information of the recipients. So this is also going to be the users that are receiving it and what domains they engaged with. Custom software has its benefits and use cases. Again, this is going to have to fall back on the business that's either going to allow it or not allow it. And finally, if you have something to block, you need to justify why you're blocking it, and you need to do an investigation before you block it. If you're not sure if you should block it or if it's a vendor, run this by your manager, get a temp block in place just in case that vendor got compromised, and all should be well. Oh, final thing. Crafting a threat hunt from any of the data that you find, like I've showed you on the IBM X-Force, and in what tools or indexes you need to search within Splunk or whatever tool you're using. Now let's check out the write-up. So considering .NET 8.0 is a disgraziato figlio di puttana, and Microsoft, I hope you understand that, because your .NET versions suck. I'm going to be doing this on my dev box. I don't advise you doing this. But anyway, we're going to open up the email. Oops, not this one. We're going to go to the sign-in activity. We're going to go to first grab the message headers. Now this application is in beta. So, yeah. So we know that the phishing type is, I believe it's standard phishing. So we'll throw the message headers in there. And then what we'll do is we'll just copy this. And then what we'll do is we'll just run it. So you should see that it's going to grab the email address out. It'll put some IOCs up here for you. This is our domain. So we can scroll down and it'll create some of the ticket. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this out. And this is what I'm ultimately working on, is to get a ticket set up where you can copy this if you need. I'll work on deduplicating all of this. And then if you need to do whois lookups, you could just click on there. And then you have your whois there. And then we just click on whois. And then you get some information provided back. You could include or to cancel it. It should include when you say include. And it pretty much does some of the investigation for you. I will be working on getting VirusTotal put in. Another thing to consider, and I didn't have time to go over this in our investigation previously to cover it, so I'm going to cover it now. You do want to check, you can see if the email came from this guy here. You want to check this address, and make sure that when you're doing your investigation, we'll just pull up the header really quick. When you do your investigation, you want to make sure that the IP address of this host matches the IP address of the received from. If they don't, chances are it's spoofed, and then you have to verify if it's actually spoofed by doing like nslookups and stuff like that. But this is one of the tools that I'll be giving you. It'll be part of the Google Drive, so keep on a lookout for updates because I will be updating that because I did promise that to you. So as always, I hope you enjoyed the episode that I put together on phishing, and Volume 1 and Volume 2 and now the final episode all make sense. If you like the content that I'm producing, please like, share, subscribe, and if you want to be notified, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next episode.